very good evening to you. Welcome to another edition of Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Paul and we'll be together until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we'll be concluding with the clip that peaked. And of course, during the course of the broadcast, we'll be taking your calls, so please stay with us. Some of you watching this broadcast might be 31 years old, even below that age. Well, my guest, he observed his 31st anniversary as a politician in St. Lucia as of last Wednesday. So we certainly have a lot to talk about. And he started as being a member of the Castries City Council. Before that, he served on the Rotaract Club, and eventually he became a candidate for the then Castries Northeast constituency in the year 1987. And in that year, he contested 2 general elections on his first outing, April the 6th and also April the 30th. He has gone on to be the Minister with responsibility for health, Minister for Community Development, Information, Broadcasting, and he's now the Minister with responsibility for infrastructure, ports, energy, and labor. He's the island's 6th Prime Minister, veteran politician, MP for Castries North, Mr. Stevenson King. Welcome to the program. You're here as well in your capacity as Acting Prime Minister of St. Lucia.
Thank you very much, Tim, and good evening, and thanks for the invitation to your program. Thank you.
Why politics?
Tim, I never really planned it. It was never anticipated in my wildest dreams. As a young man, I developed particular interests in community, in family, in country. And so my school life was one about working alongside my contemporaries. I recall in many instances where I sought assistance from my parents to assist the less fortunate contemporaries of mine, students who attended the same school with me from primary school. That seemed to have been the nature and the culture of my behavior. I then grew up and attended secondary school. And again, though I developed a very keen interest as far as national development was then concerned, and what the government of the day, at the time Sir John Compton, was doing, I was particularly interested in what the government was doing in social development, in national development, developing the country, making our society a better place to live. I remember Sir John always speaking about the quality of life and the standard of living, and I thought certainly that ought to be the aim of every government who more or less commit themselves to changing lives and developing people and creating independent people. And but never at all was it my intention, deliberate intention that is, for vying for political office. I didn't see myself as a politician at all. I remember at one time as a young man I told my mom I wanted to be a police officer. I thought policemen carried that stature in community, the stature of law and order and keeping things together, protecting our citizens. And I thought that may be a place for me to develop a career. It didn't happen. As I went through secondary school, my eyes were set on either going into engineering or architecture because of my strength in mathematics at the time. And again, that didn't happen. I ended up in banking. So it only goes to say that sometimes it's not what you set your eyes on that you achieve, but rather your calling. And probably my calling must have been politics.
And 31 years later, do you have any regrets?
Sometimes there are the shadows of regret when you look back and you ask yourself, could I have done better if I had gone into other areas, if I had dedicated my life to another profession? And there are times you feel good about the fact that you have been able to make a contribution to your society, and not necessarily by the wealth that you have acquired, because in politics, personally, I say to people, there's no wealth to acquire. You're a servant of the people, and most times you serve and you give all that you have. And what really adds a value to your contribution to politics, it's when you can look back and trace your journey and the impact that you've had on the lives of many, many people, those persons who will come to you and remind you that you assisted them to go to secondary school, you paid their CXC for them, you gave them a job, you helped them out of poverty, uplifted them, gave them a new focus, gave them a new spirit, a new life, a new opportunity. And in many instances, you never ever remember. And when they draw it to your attention, in some instances, you know, I don't remember at all because I do it genuinely and I really don't look for any repayment. I don't look for payback. I recall this young lady who came to me and reminded me that I actually assisted her mother in getting her into infant school. And she came to thank me many years later. She had become a medical practitioner. Mm-hmm. So to a certain extent, when these occasions do arise, it gives you that feeling of comfort, satisfaction, of achievement, knowing that you have made a contribution to the life of an individual or to lives of many individuals who can remind you of the assistance you've given them in shaping themselves.
You said early on that in politics there isn't any wealth to acquire, but there's some people who enter the political arena being poor and they leave being very rich.
Certainly, and these are the dishonest, unscrupulous politicians who see politics as an avenue for enrichment, because in politics you can be tempted, you can be tempted by offers made by individuals, and you can see avenues of guiding decisions and shaping even policy sometimes that you may position yourself to benefit. I do not believe that's what it's all about. I believe it's about service, and if you serve honestly and diligently, I believe your reward will be there.
Were any attempts made by foreign investors, other people, to cause you to be corrupt?
Let me just say that I have had occasions where persons have attempted making approaches, and I have certainly deflected those approaches. I feel very uncomfortable. I would be very disturbed, very angered with myself if I were ever to allow anyone to allow me to fall for the temptation. I've often said, in fact, I recall one occasion when I had to remind an individual, hey, I said, this is only a courtesy call that you're making on me. After the courtesy call, you deal with my technicians. I have nothing to do with it again. You deal with my technicians, and there's a policy and a framework of the law within which we operate. And I am always so comforted when I deal with matters, at all times, when I deal with matters within the framework of the law. And I often say to my colleagues, I recall when I was Prime Minister, gentlemen, all that we're called upon to do here is to do what is right within the framework of the law. And if we do what is right within the framework of the law, then there's nothing to worry about. We can sleep soundly at nights and don't worry about anything.
If there are corrupt politicians in St. Lucia, why do you think that none of them are behind bars right now?
Well, I believe that anyone who is corrupt, obviously, they have been able to escape the wrath of the law. And it is unfortunate that if they are, those who are corrupt have not been able to be caught. It means that the system needs to be tightened up. We need to tighten up the system. We have attempted to introduce, and there is the Integrity Commission, which deals with persons in public life.
And there's the Integrity in Public Life Act.
The Integrity in Public Life Act, which more or less gives the politicians and top public officers, top public servants, the responsibility, almost a demand to account for their income and to be able to monitor how they have acquired the wealth, you know. The thing about it is I cannot recall anyone being brought to justice. In fact, it probably isn't even that draconian to mandate that if one has failed, to declare their assets or their income, where it's coming from, and how they're able to manage in public life and to live such lavish life, etc., etc., to be able to deal with them. I'm not even too sure that it deals with that. So, to a certain extent, we need to put in the infrastructure, and I speak of the judicial infrastructure, or the legislative rather infrastructure, that would allow not just to account for your income, but also to make it difficult to be able to engage in activity that is corrupt. We need to look at that. And one of the things that I am at this time even contemplating to look at, and I've just recently got some literature on it to see how it can be brought to bear in St. Lucia, is as far as the Ministry of Infrastructure is concerned, and probably other government departments, to look at the possibility of introducing what we call a contractor general in St. Lucia, whose responsibility would be to ensure that there is fairness in the manner in which contracts have been awarded, and the procedures to be followed, the possibility of auditing contracts after they've done, and to look at that in a way that would allow the system to protect the nation, but also, I believe, to protect politicians, so that we're not tempted by the fact that in government there are millions to be managed, there are millions to be spent, and that if an opportunity comes, the unscrupulous politician will be tempted to find a way to access those resources.
But isn't it quite a challenge when, for example, you have to reward people who would have financed your campaign? I'm not referring to you in particular, but generally as a government, and you have to reward them with contracts. The impression has been given that, you know, anyone who gets the Ministry of Infrastructure, before that the Ministry of Communications and Works, they have an opportunity to reward their friends, to reward family members, and so on. How do you ensure that, as the Minister of Infrastructure, that you act above board and you act fair?
You've got to be a strong person in terms of sticking to the rules, sticking to the law, and making sure that people understand who you are and how you operate. And that is why it is important for us as a government, and I believe for every country, particularly in small nations, to look at election financing, how to put in place the necessary framework, legislative framework for election financing, so as, again, to protect the state, to protect the politician, and to protect the people, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you are accepting resources from the private sector, and then you are called now to administer the law, or to even oversee the award of contracts and other arrangements, where the very person who assisted you during the campaign, you now need to deal with those individuals. So it is a very fine line to walk. But if the person who has assisted you, whether it's a friend or a corporate citizen who has assisted you, if they are truly your friend, then they would understand that, hey, I need to protect him also. So it's not a matter of I have done for him, and so I must expect him to do anything for me. Sometimes people tend to become friends as soon as you have won an election, and you ask yourself, well, what's behind this? And you have to push back, because oftentimes it is really those who are looking to see what is it in there for them, or just before election, based on the way the elections seem to be tilting, then suddenly you've got some, new friends emerging, and based on the nature of the profession or the business, you can well understand where this is likely to end. But it calls for the strength of character to resist any such temptation. And that is why I believe if, again, we operate within the framework of the law and you do what is right, then you're safe.
Your journey started in Castries Northeast.
Castries Northeast,
in
yes.
1987. How were you selected to run a seat? Because before that, in 1982, Mr. John Bristol would have been the MP.
Yes. It's a very, it's a very strange experience for me. And in 1982, I campaigned with Mr. John Bristol, and we won that victory. At the time, I was president of the United Workers' Party Youth Arm. And by 1986-87, I contemplated going to school, going back to school. And I recall going to Sir John Compton at the time, and with an application to the University of the West Indies. And I said to him, "Sir, I would be grateful for your assistance and possibly a scholarship once I'm accepted." And he said to me, "Well, you know, Steve, the people of Castries Northeast are asking for you as a candidate." I laughed at him, and I said to him, "Sir, I'm going to support John Bristol, and I'll give him my full support and ensure that he returns." And he said, "Well, I think you should go back and think about it and come back and let me know. Go on the ground and feel it." A few months went by, and he again called me to his office and said, "Well, I am now thinking of going into the election." That was the first election. It must have been April 6th, 1987. So maybe a month before the election or two before the election, he called me, and I said, "No, sir, I'm committed to working with John Bristol and to ensure that he wins the election." In those days, Sir John had a lot of power. Now, you know, selecting a candidate, you need to go to a runoff, you need to go to the constituency, get the constituency branch to consider it, go to the executive, get the executive to accept it, and sometimes there's a lot of friction that takes place and bad blood and whatnot. In those days, Sir John and Mr. Henry Girodi could have simply determined that this is the candidate for a particular constituency. And he then said to me, "You go to the constituency, I'll speak to John Bristol, and I'll take care of you afterwards."
Another man moved.
Another man moved. And I became the candidate at the time in 1987. And it was an interesting election. It turned out to be two elections in 1 month, on the 6th of April. And the second one was on the 30th of April.
The fact that you did not take the opportunity to go overseas to study, have you regretted that?
Sometimes I do, and I still believe it's not all lost. I've gathered a wealth of experience in politics, in government, and I would have encouraged anybody who intend to go into politics, once it's your intention, to pursue that route of attempting to do your tertiary level education. Not that one is not necessarily competent in what he does, or not that one cannot develop, but then it is the way people sometimes may perceive you. In the beginning, I was perceived as having not gone to university. I was referred to as a messenger because of the fact that I worked for Sir Vincent Flosac and Henry Girodi at the firm of Flosac and Girodi. And notwithstanding that, I still accepted the challenge which Sir John gave me as a young man to contest the election.
But how has this perception affected you? Because to me, and I think to most of the viewers watching this broadcast, you're well-spoken, you're erudite, you do not come across as somebody who is lacking in knowledge. I think you're St. Lucia's best-loved politician. No one has ever said, as far as SLP candidates, or United Workers' Party candidates, that they hate Stephenson King. This is unheard of. But you have been disrespected.
Yes.
By many people, many politicians who have made reference to your lack of tertiary level education. How has this impacted you?
I never allowed it to disturb me. I always considered that they really do not know who Stephenson King is. Stephenson King is a determined man. He's resolute. He goes for what he wants when there's a need to go for it. I am one who understands that education is a lifetime experience. It's not about merely the formal education. It's about reading. It's about understanding. It's about listening. It's about also understanding where your shortcomings are, where you need to sharpen up, and to constantly use your life experience as a learning tool, if I should use that term. And my experience over the years, it has been about that. It's about participating in international fora. It's about participating in conferences, attending workshops, and really and truly taking every experience, every step of the way, as a serious element in my personal development. It's about total human development, and I'm probably a lucky guy, you know, to have been able to navigate those treacherous waters of the insults and the criticism and the allegations of whether you've attended a university or the other, or whether you have any set profession or whatnot. And I've found myself in places where, in some instances, where people would say, you sound like you're a lawyer, or they would make reference to a profession after they've heard me participate in a conversation or make a presentation, and they would try to figure out, well, I wonder what's his learning. He's, you know. So, I mean, I don't flatter myself with it. It's just that I apply myself to the work that I do, the vocation that I've entered.
Let's go back into time. 1987. Would you still decide to go into politics instead of furthering your education?
In 1987?
Yeah. If you were to go back to 87.
If I were to go back to 87, and I were to be given the opportunity of entering politics then and pursuing tertiary level education, I would certainly go for the tertiary level education. But let's see what happened in 1987. Who was the player? The great Sir John Compton. It's almost, I mean, in my estimation of him, I considered him to be this brilliant St. Lucian leader who managed this country in a way that I was so proud of. Many St. Lucians were quite proud of. And in some instances, maybe I personally felt that he couldn't have done anything wrong. That was Sir John Compton. I believe, but I studied Sir John Compton as a young boy growing up.
So you think
I listened every weekend to, in those days, the government program in which they were promoting the work of the government. And I listened to Sir John Compton and George Mallet and Alan Buskey and the rest every Sunday as a young boy. From at primary school, listened to what they were talking about the development of the country, whether it is just merely opening of a standpipe, a road, a bridge, something in the country. And it captivated my imagination of those guys making that determined contribution to the country.
So you think you were flattered when he asked you to contest the seat?
Sometimes I believe so. I mean, at the time, not really. To a certain extent, I questioned myself as to, will you be able to handle that? Will you be able to handle the political arena in terms of what was happening in the politics at the time? You must remember at that time, you know, those were the days many of us speak of the days of George Odlum and Peter Josie and the rest, the PLP and the Forum and all whatnot. To many of us, we thought those were very militant days, and at the time, the whole thing of Black Power and whatnot, and there's a lot going on. And Sir John Compton, it was a very heated period in St. Lucia's politics between 1974 and 1982, going up to 87. Very heated. So John, between 1974 and 1979, I believe the political barometric pressure was probably the highest in terms of political activity and the violence that pervaded the air at the time. And to have been called in 1987 as a candidate, to a certain extent, I wouldn't say that I was flattered, but at the end of the day, when I assessed it, I believe, I thank Sir John Compton. I thought he had seen more than I thought that I possessed. And I really could not have failed him in accepting the responsibility.
And you won your seat come April the 6th
Yes.
in that general election of 1987. What was the feeling like for you at the time?
It was a great feeling. It was one of great joy and an achievement for me. And I was very excited about what I could have done finally to serve people, to help people, to change lives, and to really give out as much as I can, as much as I could have given then to those individuals. So, and the thing about it then was that I was surrounded by so many young people who believed in me, and it stemmed from my journey in the Youth Arm. When we formed the Youth Arm, and we had only formed the Youth Arm 7 years before, but I commanded a lot of respect among the young people. I was a great mobilizer throughout the country for the United Workers' Party Youth Arm. We galvanized the country, the north, south, east, and west, and so I had a great following island-wide among young people. So for me, I saw it as a tremendous achievement as a young person, winning my seat and having an opportunity finally to serve the people. In fact, I give people the story of my first two salaries. I first entered politics. I never even knew what the salary was. I can't tell you what it was then. Mm-hmm. It must have been about $3,000 or so. But my first 2 months of income, I got nothing in my pocket. Because in the first 2 months, I gave away all that I received. Mm-hmm. Everybody who came with a problem, I took care of it by writing a check. And then I found out by the time, because normally you enter, by the time you get in as a minister, the deadline date for processing salaries had gone. So you'd end up having your first 2 months' salary being paid in the second month. Right. So by the time I received that and it went into my checking account, the overdraft had just swallowed it up. So, but I guess, it's based on how I felt at the time.
But what is the experience like for you going into this is your first outing, mm-hmm. and you're already facing 2 general elections in 1 month. Mm-hmm. The first was April the 6th and the second was the 30th. What was going through your mind as a political novice?
Mm-hmm. Unbelievably so, when Sir John approached me after the first election and said to me, "Are you prepared to go for a second round?" I said, "A second round of what?" He said, "Back to the polls." I said, "Of course, sir." Of course, in the euphoria of victory, I felt I could have done it again and again and again. And whether it was held 2 months later or 1 month later or 5 years later, I thought that I had got it right and I could have done it again. And I simply said yes. And in the second round, I certainly performed better. In the first round, I think I won by 163 votes thereabout, in a 3-cornered fight.
Defeated Dr. Michael
Pilgrim and Oswald Augustine. Mm-hmm. And in the second round, it was only Dr. Pilgrim who ran, and I increased that number by 600, I think 683 or thereabout. But I believe I was young, I was bold, I was daring, and I was prepared to face the challenge.
And then the cabinet was announced. Mm-hmm. You were appointed Minister for Community Development, Social Affairs, Youth, Sports, and Local Government. What qualified you then to serve in the respective portfolios?
I think Sir John alone can answer that, but it turned out that I believe I did well. I never anticipated that Sir John would have made me a senior minister then. The most I expected was that he would have made me a junior minister. I, probably a bit naive, felt that, well, John Bristol was his personal assistant in the Prime Minister's office. So since I'm replacing John Bristol, I may have been appointed as a personal assistant to the Prime Minister. But of course, Sir John came out without negotiating with me or informing me ahead of time as to the portfolios that he would have assigned to me. Sir John turned out and appointed me Minister for Community Development, Social Affairs, Youth, Sports, Local Government, Ecclesiastical Affairs, and then Women's Affairs. Mm-hmm. So it was a whole mouthful of portfolios that he entrusted me to. And I must admit that those were probably the most exciting years in my political career. I mean, in youth and sports and all of the sporting activities. And then it was a time when St. Lucia certainly excelled in sports. In those days, we were winning almost everything. By between 1987 and 1992 at the OECS level, Windward Islands, whether it is track and field, football, cricket, you name it. It was during that period of time a youth group, a band came out with a song called "Who Are the Champions?" St. Lucia, we are the champions. You know,
wasn't it Rhythm Crazy?
No, it was. I can't remember, but it was one of those groups.
Yeah, one of
yes.
In 1987, following that general election, you served as an MP on both the 17 MPs from both the United Workers' Party camp and the SLP. It read like this: Alan Bousquet, you had Stevenson King, Romanus Lansico, George Mallet, Desmond Brathwaite, John Compton, Louis George, Ferdinand Henry, Anthony Avril, that's for the United Workers' Party. For the SLP was Julian R. Hunt, George Regis, Baden Ale, Evans Cauldron, Neville Snack, Peter Josie, Cecil Lay, and Remy Lesmore. Your thoughts about those who have passed away? Alan Bousquet.
Alan Bousquet was a great politician, a humble individual, but a practical politician, practical minister. For those who probably underestimated him and diminished his academic ability, he was a very intelligent man. He read a lot and he handled his ministry in a manner in which I believe proved him to be a consummate politician and one who knew where he was heading to. In fact, I remember a joke once when at a cabinet meeting when we were doing the budget, and Sir John was lamenting the fact that the fiscal space didn't allow him to give the Ministry of Infrastructure, well, Communications and Works at the time, the requisite allocation to perform the works that the ministry had planned for that financial year. And Alan Bousquet, deceased, retorted by saying, I don't want to know about whether you have it or not. You're the Minister for Finance. You need to find it. I've got the work to do. So, great politician. I love them. I love them.
Romanus Lansico.
Romanus Lansico was yet another consummate politician. I think he slept politics, he breathed politics, he behaved political. His every move was one of politics. He believed in the media. Romanus Lansico, virtually, if Romanus Lansico at the time that he served had the opportunity of cell phones in the magnitude and the advanced technology.
And close to 20 radio stations.
And close to 20 radio stations. You'd be waking up and sleeping with Romanus Lansico. And everywhere he goes, he would have had some video clip to put out. That was Romanus Lansico. He worked hard. He was a very determined politician. He virtually, if government was in a position where it was unable to commit to any project, he would go out to the public to get it. So, for example, the VG Sports Complex, which I believe should be named the Romanus Lansico Sports Complex. I mean, he went out there and raised the money for the VG Sports Complex. When he walked for Victoria, he didn't achieve what he attempted to do to rebuild a new hospital, or to build a new hospital, or to rebuild Victoria Hospital for that matter. But he was able to raise $1 million as he had targeted. And at the end of the day, he ended up with a maternity and gynecology wing. So again, Romanus Lansico, who I worked very closely with, he was a member of the JC's movement in St. Lucia, and in some of his politics reflected the behavior of the movement, of the JC's movement. Very community-oriented, very committed to people, very committed to doing things in the community, and he served St. Lucia well.
George Mallet, Sir George Mallet.
Oh, Sir George, I had great admiration for Sir George, very great admiration. I believe he was certainly a career politician. He was very meticulous in whatever he did. He armed himself at all times, whether it's in preparation for a budget debate or whether in preparation for the campaign, a public meeting, whatever the case may be. I recall in 1982, I worked also with him in the 82 election, general elections, with himself and John Bristol. And he was very meticulous about everything in terms of our own assessment of his ability or the potential of his victory and the preparation and everything. And in Parliament, he was one to admire. When he stood to speak, he was eloquent, he had a command of his subject, and he delivered in what I call spiraling attacks, okay? So he'd start very lucidly, very calm, and he developed that momentum, and he was fiery. And I think he's yet another politician that St. Lucian should be proud of.
Two things I like about him. One, class.
Yes, he did.
When you saw him, you saw a class individual. And two, I liked his tone.
Yes, yes.
You see, listening to him, his tone,
very well,
he
very
has a
well.
captivating tone.
Very well.
Of course, you've spoken about Sir John Compton.
Sir John, yes.
So let's talk about the late Louis George.
Louis was the kind of unassuming individual that many people may not have understood in terms of his personality, his behavior, but he was also a very intellectual individual. He saw things very deeply, intellectually deep, and had a vision that I'm not too sure many people really understood, but he certainly stood for country and for people, and he defended the St. Lucian class, the St. Lucian people, the working class. He defended them.
Well, we made a statement about menial jobs.
Well, yes, of course, certainly. As far as Louis was concerned, that investments in this country should not merely be one where we give away everything and in exchange for a few jobs at the lower level, while the investors preserve the high-end jobs, the administrative and managerial jobs for the expats. He didn't believe in that sort of thing. And he stood strong on it, even stood up to Sir John on this matter. In fact, the statement of menial jobs is renowned for him. He's renowned for that statement. So I believe we did well with Louis. Louis made his contribution in the Department of Education, Ministry of Education. He certainly served well in that department, and to a great extent, the 5 secondary schools which were built during the time of the Labour Party, certainly, the actual negotiations with the World Bank for the establishment of those 5 secondary schools actually started with Louis George. He did not see it through, but the process started during his tenure, and he must be remembered for some.
He had a spat with Sir John over the use of the Minnefield Park for Carnival and something of that
Louis
nature.
George?
Or was it yourself?
No, I was the one.
You were the one. Okay,
I was
all
the
right.
one.
Ferdinand Henry, the late Ferdinand Henry.
No, he's not, is he?
Yes.
Ferdinand Henry.
Yeah.
Ferdinand has been ill. In fact,
Is he still alive?
yes, he's
Is
still
Henry's
alive.
alive?
He's not too well right now.
Okay.
In fact, I understood only today that he may have been hospitalized a few days ago. And I met him. In fact, I visited him a few Sundays ago. And he's not doing well. But Ferdinand served in the agricultural sector. He served as junior minister in agriculture at one time, and then agriculture minister. He was one who was very proud of himself as having come from a rural community, and how he felt about the agricultural sector. But Ferdinand had experience in banking, having served at then I believe it was called Agricultural Development Bank, which eventually emerged as the St. Lucia Development Bank. So he is passionate about agriculture. He himself was an agriculturist, and he certainly believed that through agriculture the country can advance. And I believe he's right. I believe if we're able to create a true culture of agriculture in our society, and we are able to put the necessary institutions to support the development of agriculture and see agriculture as a resource that we can export, we can go a long way.
And finally, Remy Lesmore of the SLP.
Remy Lesmore on the SLP, Remy was a very fiery politician, And when he stood in Parliament, he went for the jugular. Although he served, I believe, only 5 years or 10 years, he served in opposition. No, I believe he did serve in the 79 government and then served for a period thereafter. But Remy was one who was very passionate about what he did. We had a very good relationship, Remy and myself. We spoke frequently. And strange enough, I had a good relationship with many of the opposition members.
You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS television. My guest is Acting Prime Minister, Mr. Stevenson King. What we're talking about, we're reminiscing, looking at the 31 years that Mr. King has been in active politics in St. Lucia. When we come back, we'll also be looking forward. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Once again, you're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS television. My name is Timothy Polion. We go up until 10 o'clock this evening, and we conclude with the clip that peaked. My guest is Acting Prime Minister, Mr. Stevenson King. He's also the MP for Castries North, veteran politician. We're looking at his 31 years in active politics in St. Lucia. So let's fast forward to 2006, the United Workers' Party winning the general election, you winning your seat as well. And subsequently, you acting as Prime Minister following the illness of Sir John Compton in May, and then later you being appointed, sworn in, as Prime Minister of the island on September the 9th. What was that feeling? Have you ever anticipated you'd have been Prime Minister of St. Lucia?
Never did anticipate that I would have become the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Of course, I'd spent 9 years in opposition. I spent much of that time dedicated to rebuilding the party and redeveloping the structures, the organs, and systems of the party to make the party a more modern party and a better functioning party. So getting back into active politics in 2006, and you recall the lead up to that in terms of my candidacy, because Sibel Snack was being considered as a candidate, and Sir John again more or less indicated that, hey, the people of Castries North are saying they want Stevenson King. So upon my victory, I was asked to return to the Ministry of Health to continue that mission. And it was during that time that Sir John fell ill. Of course, when we got back in 2006, Sir John, in a particular way, pointed or gave the impression that he was depending on me for support, and positioned me in a manner to say to me that, hey, you are the person I'm looking to. So even while we were speaking about, or we were debating about the whole issue of Taiwan, China, Sir John constantly confided in me as where he'd like to go. Okay, in the seating arrangements, he again placed me next to him, and I recall the first time he called upon me to act, and I sort of, sometimes I tend to laugh at those things, when the secretary called and said, well, Sir John is going to Barbados and you are the acting Prime Minister. I laughed and I said, what does that mean? What do I have to do? I can't have to come and sit in his office? And she said, not really, but you've got to. And then I got the writ from the Governor General. But again,
but why were you surprised? You're expecting what, Mr. Leonard Montut to be acting as Prime Minister then? Because what?
Then he was
deputy political leader.
Deputy political leader. But then I was also the chairman of the United Workers' Party. So in Sir John's mind, he saw me as being senior, one, by virtue of my experience, two, by virtue of the fact that I held the position of chairman of the party. And the chairman of the party really, under the old constitution, was more or less like the president of the party as chairman, and Sir John the political leader. And even in the new constitution, when you look at the structure of the new constitution, the chairman simply deferred to the political leader on political issues, but when it comes to administrative and the whole party organization, it's really the chairman and not the political leader. So Sir John saw these things, and his first trip out, he appointed me to act. And of course, he fell ill.
What was the mood like the first time you were asked to act as Prime Minister?
At that time, when I was first asked to act as Prime Minister, I probably behaved in a similar manner as the time when I was called upon to become a full-fledged minister. I took it in strides. I saw it as a challenge that I welcomed, and I understood that in the performance of my responsibilities, I must be accountable to the people. So this is the manner in which I accepted.
So what was the reception?
The reception was
the other
good.
cabinet ministers.
Among the cabinet ministers, they accepted it. Yeah. You know, we had our own difficulty when the time came in as far as endorsing me as the Prime Minister. But throughout I served, and members gave me the respect that I deserved as acting Prime Minister for the period leading up to September. Upon his death, they came forward and did give me the support by endorsing me and to allow the Governor General the freedom and latitude to be able to appoint me in her own judgment, realizing that I had the level of support among the cabinet ministers. Of course, the rest is history. Some would say that there were other persons with ambition, but we worked very well, and along the way there were ministers, even some of those who felt that probably they should have been the one appointed or selected, whatever way you put it, who certainly indicated to me that, you know, we really admire the fact that you've been able to steady the ship and to move forward and to be able to achieve some of the achievements that we attained then.
But then you lost the general election of 2011.
We lost the general elections.
Do you take any responsibility for this, or what responsibility do you take?
Of course, every Prime Minister who loses an election certainly must accept the responsibility. After all, you're the Prime Minister. You're the one responsible for managing your team, managing your government, and taking policy decisions that will appeal to the general public, to the electorate, to give that level of confidence to return you to office. And there are a number of things which may have cost us the election. You know, we did have some rumblings in government at times. Then you had in the latter period, leading up to the election campaign, a few months before the election, September, you had the events of Richard Frederick and his withdrawal of the withdrawal of his visa, and that, I believe, to a certain extent impacted on the results. Generally, if you look at the performance of the government in terms of what we did then, our performance at the community level in terms of the projects that we did, of course, we fell short on some of the major projects in terms of the investment projects. Many of the big projects that we're looking for, we had anticipated and we were negotiating, never came through. But otherwise, we were able to record economic growth. We were able to steady ourselves and to be able to bring the country to a point where, even though we lost the election, the government which succeeded us, they were able to take the government and the country and to move on and to do what they did. Even though when we look back, we tend to compare the performances of the two administrations in terms of what did we achieve and what did they achieve. But generally, I believe among the people, there's a level of comfort. In some instances, in fact, one of my colleagues often say that that the country was managed so well that people didn't realize that there was a financial crisis in the world. We certainly managed. We were able to develop programs that spanned the country and got people involved.
But then there was just so much infighting.
There was quite a bit going on.
Do you take any responsibility for this? Is there a lack of you really showing your mettle as a leader?
I mean, people tend to believe that what went on then was because of my weakness in managing the men who I inherited, of course. I wouldn't say that we did have a few issues, and I think when you look at it, it wasn't the infighting that people often refer to. Was just probably one occasion. I can't remember a series of events in which we were quarreling and fighting with each other. There was one occasion when there was an attempt to remove me or to withdraw rather their support for me as Prime Minister of the government. That was the one occasion. There are a lot of allegations made, and we made allegations unless you can present, and I often took a lot of flack for saying present the evidence, but there are a lot of allegations made about certain ministers. But I think the question of that one single occasion where there was a perception that there was infighting certainly may have dealt a blow.
What would you have done? What would you do differently if you were in that situation again?
I think what can make it different is the fact that as a leader of a political party, that you're given the opportunity to make a determination on the composition of the men that you go to the polls with. When you inherit the leadership, there can be a perception and a belief among individuals that I am the one who made you, and therefore I expect you to fulfill my intentions, my dreams, or whatever the case may be. But I believe if you are in command, if you are in command of the leadership ahead of time, and you can certainly shape your team and carve it out and select the men that you believe you'd like to have with you and to work with you, certainly you can have that kind of commanding authority to move forward.
Should you have reshuffled the cabinet, you think?
I believe I should have reshuffled the cabinet. When I think of it, I should have reshuffled the cabinet and to give a fresh look to the cabinet. What I did when I assumed the prime ministership then, I simply more or less kept the cabinet and just reassigned certain portfolios or reassigned ministers to certain portfolios. But I probably should have and done a complete reshuffle of the cabinet, not necessarily just realignment of portfolios, but reshuffle entirely, and to see how best that would have worked.
After losing the 2011 general election, you also lost the leadership of the United Workers' Party.
Yes,
that must have been very painful.
It was painful, and
was it humiliating as well for you?
A bit humiliating, I must admit, because at the time you tend to wonder, well, what went wrong between 2011 and the convention, and it almost seemed that everyone had turned against you, and that you were left alone. And considering the commitment that I had to the party, and I continue to have to the party, because I believe I'm a devoted, devoured UWP, and it was a painful thing when you reflect then on the events leading up to my removal. It wasn't the best of times, and it took some time to not to accept the fact that it happened, because it's a democracy, and in a democracy you expect to win and you expect to lose. But sometimes you question.
But you see, you did not want to accept the outcome.
It's not the outcome. I felt it was the manner in which it was done, and basically that was it.
Yeah, but you understand politics, right?
Yes, I do.
It's not about playing fairly and so on.
Of course not. Of course, in generally, but it was a painful one.
Have you recovered?
I've recovered a long time ago, a long time ago, and I have re-emerged. I came forward in the 2016 general elections. I believe my return to the party certainly infused a bit of energy and a lot of confidence among our people. I mean, it was one in which, I often say that in every election there is an icon, or what I call a campaign icon or a political icon, and most times it's a newcomer who creates that aura, etc. And I believe my return to the platform and the "you pair" phrase certainly was the resounding message and clarion call that gave young UWP the confidence of going to the polls in 2016.
Was it a strategic effort on your part, your delayed return? Or is it a case where you were bargaining behind the scenes?
There was not much bargaining. I mean, I certainly spent quite a bit of time behind the scenes strategizing in terms of what my next move should have been. I understood very well my popularity throughout the country. There wouldn't be a place that I would have visited without persons meeting me and saying, you're my prime minister, you're the best prime minister, etc., and encouraging me on. Of course, there were a lot of mixed signals coming forward. There were the signals of listen, don't worry, you stay there, you'll return. And there are those who would sort of flatter me and say, listen, let's come on the other side, this sort of thing. It is one in which, you've got to sit back and strategize.
Was there an iota of a chance of you joining the St. Lucia Labour Party then?
It was a difficult thing to think of. I've been UWP all my life, as long as I can recall. As far as I can recall, I have been UWP. I believe up to 2016 and now, I'm still probably the biggest UWP in St. Lucia, not physically, but certainly I have been there, I've been out there, and when you consider that I served for 31 years, there are young people who don't know anybody else in politics than Stephenson King. Young people at the age of 30, many of them don't know anybody in Castries North. Many of the young people don't know any other politician but Stephenson King serving them. And in their view, Stephenson King don't even represent a political party. He represents them. So it's not about UWP and SLP. It's about a relationship which they have developed over the years. And in that relationship, they only know one man, and that is Stephenson King. So for me, it would have been a very uncomfortable thing to even think that I was close in my attempts to return and to move across and join the St. Lucia Labour Party. But it was strategic, definitely. It was strategic.
What's your relationship now with the political leader of the UWP and Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alan Shasley?
We have a very cordial relationship, I must admit, and he works very well with me. I must accept the fact that one of the positive things about the Prime Minister is that he has given me tremendous support in the Ministry of Infrastructure in terms of what I consider to be a very ambitious program put together by me in the ministry in terms of approaching the infrastructure of St. Lucia. So the vision for infrastructure in St. Lucia in terms of the road program, the infrastructure works to be done, etc., throughout the country, for the next 4 years would require something like $450 million if we are to bring infrastructure to a particular level. He understands that very well, and he was very clever in terms of introducing the fuel levy, which some people believes that it is a gimmick and a form of taxation that we have clothed in the clothing that it is, to say that it is a road levy and specific to roads. Of course, we all understand how the budget works. Every department would bring in revenue, but it all goes into one central facility called the Consolidated Fund. What comes out of there is by no means any perfect measurement of the revenue of any department. So if you take let's take a small department like the Department of Labor, which possibly brings in some revenue in, let's say, the issuance of work permits. But then when you compare the revenue that it brings in and what it gets back, it probably doesn't compare. And there are other departments which little or no revenue, particularly the social departments, little or no revenue, but the investment you've got to make there is quite a bit of investment. So the fuel levy, which is dedicated to the roads, certainly is a creative method of raising revenue for reconstruction and maintenance of our road network. And creativity in governance and in government, I mean, is one that has evolved over the years. You know, many years ago, you could have only financed public sector projects through loan funding, grant funding, through your local revenue sources, and that was it. And but we have seen in the last 20 years or so, we have seen some new methods of financing of public sector projects. We first started with the BOLT in 1997, when the Ministry of Communications and Works headquarters in Union was built on a BOLT arrangement: build, operate, lease and transfer, which meant that the NIPDEC out of Trinidad came with the resources, the financial resources, developed a design, they built it, they operated it, we leased it from them for a period of time, and then they have now transferred it to the government. So we're able to do that and to have what we call an off-balance sheet transaction. So it doesn't appear on your balance sheet as a loan or a debt. It appears there as rental of property. So there's a lot of creative, and so the levy is a creative mechanism for financing of our road infrastructure. And I must say that in itself is an indication of the support that I've received from the Prime Minister.
You intend to be in active politics for how long? The next 4 years?
As long
you
as
will not be contesting the next general election?
As long as the people want me, I'll be there for them. I go by what the people want. What the people want, Stevenson King, I go with it.
So you possibly can contest the next general election?
Can't.
You're not ruling out anything? You can?
Can't.
Can.
Oh, well, by God's grace. I mean, with the breath of life and the blessings of the Lord and the Spirit, that certainly next election I'm contesting. At the end of the day, whether that gift is given to me by the Almighty, the balance is left to the people to determine whether at all they want to continue with me.
Do you think politicians have a weakness when it comes to power, when it comes to politics and so on, not knowing when to quit?
We get immersed into it. We get, I should say, I wouldn't say spoiled, but when you get into it, it seems to be a difficult thing to get out. Many politicians, in fact, I often say, I was saying on Saturday, that politicians are always winning. You speak to them and they tell you, I'm winning the next election. They never know when they're going to lose. Right. So, of course, you never know when you're going to lose. But if you do what is right and you attend to the needs of the people, certainly they will re-elect you. And I think what people generally look for is sincerity. They look for commitment. They look for your works. And most times, you know, the people don't necessarily always seem to be coming out looking for handouts. There are people who come to see me, and there are times when I sit down, spend some time just speaking to them and guiding them, giving them advice. There are those I admonish. I admonish the young people, try to bring them on the straight and narrow. to help them see life in a different way and to let them know if you spoil your first 25 years, then you can't be in problems. So, you know, I think politics, we can get, as I said, immersed in it, and we can sometimes not know when to quit. The only problem about not knowing when to quit is to the detriment of your own health. Sometimes politicians stay on until the end, and by that time, when you finally make that decision, you realize, well, you've given so much of your life that, you know, you have kind of compromised your family, ignored them, and the little that you give to them is so little that sometimes, you know, you wonder if it's enough.
You're watching Newsmaker Live. We're due for a break. When we come back, your calls, so please stay with us.
So far, so good.
Yeah. Welcome back. We'll put the telephone number on the screen so that you can call right now with your questions and your comments for my guest. Once again, Acting Prime Minister Mr. Stephenson King is also the MP for Castries North and is also the Minister with responsibility for infrastructure, ports, energy and labor. He is St. Lucia's 6th Prime Minister, a veteran politician, and after 31 years, he still does not know when he'll bow out of active politics. I think we already have a caller online. Hello, good evening, you're on the air. Hello.
Good evening, Honorable King.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, how are you?
All right, okay.
It's already 10 minutes to 10, so you have 1 minute, sir.
1 minute, okay.
Go ahead.
A positive account of the ministers, the people who you work with. But it also says a lot about Sir John.
Yes.
He was always receptive to the visions of his colleague. You know what I'm saying?
It was always...
receptive to the vision.
Yes.
Like, for example, Minister Lansiko. Initially, Sir John didn't go along with it, you know, but he challenged him that if he could raise $1 million, he would get the rest for him.
Very well.
Okay,
Very well.
I recall
you're
that.
Absolutely correct.
I also recall that with the issue of school, allowing Rastas to go to school.
Yes.
I recall you telling Louis that, Louis, you know what you're doing, eh? And Louis say, yeah, you sure that, yeah, they must go to school.
Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, that's the thing about him. And what about Leonard Riviere? Didn't you serve together with him?
No, Leonard served up to 1987.
Okay.
He won in 82 and lost in 87.
Yeah.
So in 87, I served with Baden Alley.
And also, Minister Ferdinand at the time, he played a big part in the Mabria Valley Development Project.
He played a big part in the Mabria Development
He was very instrumental in that.
Very instrumental because he felt that there was need for land distribution and
but
for
currently,
the people to take
Minister,
control. Yeah.
It's going on. It's past a decade now. You promised to do something on the beach, you know.
Yes.
You know who it's calling?
I know.
Don't laugh for me there,
You still play
don't
your
laugh
football?
For me. You have to come through.
I've got to come through, and let me reassure you that
don't
I
wait
have
till
not.
they put you out, you know. It's when you're there and you have the power, you have to do it, you know.
That's right. So I've got some time to achieve that.
Yeah.
In fact, I must tell you that.
Okay, caller, thank you so much.
Okay, lastly.
Yeah.
About the people in La Clery there.
Yes.
In the CDCs. What plans you have for them? They have a lot of young families there that are going to be displaced, you know.
Okay,
and,
plans for the people at La Clery, what plans do you have for them? Let me try and help you. I'll do this live on television. Let's see how we could get this back into your ears. Okay, we have it now.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Sorry, caller, we've had some technical difficulty here. I think it's okay now.
We have another call. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air. Hold on. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. King.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with your performance in government.
Thank you very much.
And I am wishing Mr. Chasney the best in his 5 years as Prime Minister. and I am very impressed that you supported him 100%. Let us continue with the good work. We know that the United Workers' Party, historically speaking, always have good records when it comes to administration. And I hope that you will continue to do the good work and support him, and not only you, all the other ministers. Rally behind him and make sure for the 5 years that we will get positive results. As a matter of fact, we have already seen positive results in your administration. So I only pray that the Most High will bless you all and that you all will continue to do a good work. You will always find criticism on the other side. We know that. Those who are out want to come in, and they will never give you all credit for the good work you all are doing. But you all must not lose focus on what you all are doing. Forget about them, and look for the to do the good work for the people of this country.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for calling. We await another call.
Thank you very much, caller, for your very positive comments and your encouragement. I believe the UWP has that track record of being a government of workers and a government which addresses the concerns of the people, and we operate as a team. And if there's one person who is a team player, it's Stevenson King.
Okay, let's see if we get another call while you try to fix this again. We have another call online. Once again, this is Newsmaker Live. Good evening, you're on the air.
For the sales and marketing.
Okay, we lost that call, but continue to call us. And once again, my guest this evening is Acting Prime Minister Mr. Stevenson King, also the MP for Castries North.
I want to just address one of the I think one caller called, a good friend of mine, asking about the plans to the Leclerc community. And I believe he's referring to what is known as the Leclerc CDC area. It is an area which was built, a housing project which was done after the 1948 fire thereabout. And for years, successive governments have attempted to redevelop that community. It must be redeveloped. We would love to ensure, we would like to see a development that encourages young professionals, one that is aesthetically appealing to the country, to the community, and to make sure that at the end of the day, the people of Leclerc and Castries North are proud of the development. As it is now, it's unfit for human habitation. A number of the systems, whether it's sewer, etc., are non-functional. The whole question of the electrical connections and whatnot, installations, all of these are bad, and we need to do something. So basically, they have been given notice to quit. The legal tenants have accepted the package which was offered previously by the former administration and continued by us now, and most of them have moved out. So now is the time to move in and to commence the demolition work.
And it was the plans for this area?
Oh, to put in a nice, what I call town center, which would lend to the community in terms of some commercial activity and housing. And the whole idea is to give young and aspiring young people, professionals, an opportunity to find housing.
We have a call. Thank you so much for holding on, caller.
Yeah, Tim, good night.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
PM King, good night to you.
Good evening, sir. Good night. How are you doing? Ubakatan mo? Ibakatan mo so ya?
No, now what was
Ugawe mo? Okay.
PM King, I know we were there in the years gone by, right?
You know I was there when?
In the years gone by from your farm.
Yes, of course.
And rest is history.
Yes.
Now, PM King, one thing I want to do also tonight.
Mm-hmm.
You still have a convention this year?
Yes, I'm listening.
Huh?
I'm listening. You'd like me to have a convention this year?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We don't have one this year because what I'm hearing is what I'm hearing is it seems to me there's something to put you again as a leader of the party.
Well, I'm not too sure what you're hearing, but what I do know is that the organs of the party have been oiled and have been mobilized to commence the process leading up to convention, the zonal conferences, the the various constituency election of officers, and hopefully at some stage later in the year the convention will be announced, at which the usual activities will take place, and that is to look at the structure of the party and the executive of the party.
Okay, boss. All right.
All right.
Okay? Good.
Cool.
Would you be contesting any position on the executive?
It's very early to answer your question. And I must say to you, Tim, that my focus really is now on the responsibility that I've got at hand, and that is the responsibility of managing the infrastructure of the country to maintain, to repair, and reconstruct. And I am very committed to that responsibility. I would love to see St. Lucia's infrastructure brought up to a standard and maintained at a level second to none in the region. I do know the resources are tight, but I believe if only we can put in place the programs, we can do it.
Final call. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hi. Good evening to you, sir. You are on the air. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Brother Tim. Brother
Yeah.
King.
Hi, how are you?
Yes. Caller.
How's that voice?
Caller, your television set is on. Can you turn it down, please, or turn it off?
Okay. I will turn down the volume for you a bit.
Yes. Go ahead,
Hold on,
please.
Just barely a bit.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's take the final comments from you, Mr. King.
Well, Tim, I first want to thank you for inviting me, and you attempted to do a sort of review through the years, 31 years, during which time I served. I feel very proud of the fact that I was able to serve. I am very thankful for the people who gave me the opportunity in the first place and who continue to give me that opportunity, the people of Castries North, Castries Northeast by extension, and who maintain their belief and confidence in me as a parliamentary representative. I do know that I'm not the perfect individual, I'm not a perfect man. I do know that there can be shortcomings, there have been shortcomings, but I'm always determined to improve on life in the community, in the constituency. And there's a vision which I continue to pursue that I'd love to realize its total and holistic attainment whenever the time comes for me to retire. At the national level, I'm certainly committed to the cause. I'm certainly committed to the mission which have been given to me, and in this case, in the area of infrastructure, ports, energy, and labor. Labor oftentimes is placed on the back burner, but there's so much to be done in labor, and I must indicate that, in fact, tomorrow, we commencing the program of occupational safety and health with an activity at the financial center, where the focus really is to sensitize persons on workplace health and safety issues, which oftentimes impacts negatively on productivity, the ability of our workers to perform properly. And in the Department of Labor, my mission now is to strengthen the department, to make the department more professional, more focused, and to address all of the issues, including the industrial relations issues, to bring about the kind of social climate and the relationship between government, employers, and trade unions. So the mandate is there, and I am very confident as to what the future holds for me in politics and my contribution to the country.
Mr. King, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live. To you, thank you so much for watching the broadcast as always and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked. Once again, as a broadcast, thank you so much for watching. My name is Timothy Paulion saying good night and see you next time.